So Stella, at Stella Labs, you're helping clients develop impactful and effective learning solutions. And so within that, how are you using neuroscience to support the design of that learning?
Well, for me, it's fundamental to how you design learning anyway. I'm just going to slightly check on your definition of neuroscience, or give you my definition, because some people see it as purely the brain science, purely the physical brain science. I actually define it quite broadly, because for me, it's the science of all things to do with our brains. So that includes physiology of your brain, it includes cognitive science, even a bit of AI thrown in if it's related to the science of your brain. So I define it quite broadly. And for me, it affects everything we do, absolutely everything we do, because you have to think about humans when they learn as a whole being. So it's thinking about them really holistically. They're not just, a brain in a box, they're a brain in a body. So for me, it's really thinking about, for a start, you've got to keep that person, you've got to keep the sort of the brain stem happy, quiet, quiescent, because otherwise the brain stem is going to be shouting, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I can't breathe properly. It's going to be making a noise. So you have to think, first of all, how can we create a physical and physiological environment where the brain is ready to learn and not just, scream for help. So that's kind of, the first thing, make sure there's a really good learning environment first. Then there's the kind of the stuff that's going on unconsciously that hugely affects how we think and how we learn. So, you've really got to tap into people's emotions, get them. So many organizations talk about, let's engage our people, and then they don't think about what that means further on. So, keep tapping into people's emotions, use emotional context, because and emotional content, because that's much more likely to be sticky for people. It's much more likely to resonate with them. Tap into people's current memories, link to the memories people already have. So one of the first things we do with all our programs is say, what do you already know? Because it just kind of warms up the parts of their brain that this new information is going to start sticking in. It starts to warm it up and have it ready, and they've got those networks kind of beginning to activate. So that's a huge one for me. What else is important? Well, you've clearly got the kind of the hard work part, the kind of the frontal cortex that is going to start consciously processing new information, new experiences. But one of the things we know about that is it's hugely energy hungry, and we can't learn, or we can't keep on learning until we've taken some of that information from that prefrontal cortex and actually started to embed it into our longer term memory, turn what we do into habits and procedures that we can do unconsciously without having to think about them. Every time you had to go through a door, you had to really think about it consciously, you'd be absolutely exhausted. So how can we create habits and unconscious ways of behaving? How do we make that normal? And that comes through practice. So get people to practice stuff, get people to repeat stuff. And I think one of the other really things is thinking about, what are you wanting people to learn? Do you want them to learn knowledge? Because that's one thing. Or do you, and normally at work, people actually want you to change your behavior, to change your skills. And that's a whole different activity. You can learn knowledge and that's fine. But actually, if you start thinking about the cognitive and the brain science of learning skills, you're then very much having to think about, how do we involve the body? How do we involve the actual really different parts of their brain than just the knowledge parts of their brain? So for me, it's really important that you think about all those things. And then, one of the ones that there's so much evidence around is the kind of spaced repetition piece. And I think there are people who understand well, I know there are people who understand spaced repetition. I think there are people who think we need to repeat stuff, but often it's the tutor or the teacher or the facilitator, call them what they want, or the system that's repeating stuff. But actually that's useless, because it's the learner who needs to build new networks. They need to build stronger networks. So they need to do the repeating, and they need to recall, not recognize. That's a big challenge, I think, between this idea of, oh yeah, that looks familiar. Yeah, I recognize that. one of the reasons not to use simple multiple choice tests, because if we recognize stuff easily, but actually what we need to be able to do to function in the real world is recall stuff and then be able to do it. So that's kind of off the top of my head, that's a whole pile of things I really think we need to think about hard when we're thinking about how we design learning.